Hi everyone, welcome to the Highline Heritage Museum. This is Nancy. I'm the executive director, and we just want to say thank you for joining us tonight. I would like to share this with you. So please, let's take a moment to recognize that we are the native land. Please think in honor of those who have been preceding us, including the people of the Duwamish, the Snoqualmie, the Nisqually, and the Mukashu tribes. This is 7 stories, so we're extremely excited to have you here. One last comment from me is that we will be having our next session on March 25th, and it's going to be When I Was a Kid. So please pick one of these. They are located on the front. Share it with people. We need more storytellers. And the next one after that, on April 22nd, will be If I Only Listen. So please take one of these. And if you're interested, if you really want to share something maybe from a neighbor or to your kid or your family, please share this with them. And I'm just excited to have you here. So I'm going to welcome Deborah, and she's going to be the one guiding us through this program. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah, and I will be introducing the different storytellers tonight. We're very excited to have 3 brand new storytellers and one practiced. You've done it before, Deborah?
Not here.
Not here, okay.
Oh, no.
Everybody here is new, except me, and I will be telling a story too. We're going to start with Debra Valpey. Now, I've known Deborah for some years. Can you hear me? I'm not at the microphone. And I know her she's synonymous with art. Everything about her art, she does painting, all kinds of art, has all these people who are involved in that. But I know that she also writes, and tonight she'll be telling a story. And she wanted us to know that she retired from teaching at Highline High School in 2006, and since then has adopted an avocation for art and writing while striving to serve her community and become the kind of person her dog already thinks she is. So please welcome Debra Valpey.
This is a story about how I became a 71-year-old grandmother of 8 without ever having given birth. And I'd like to start with a story of me in maternity clothes at age 3. My mother was going to have a baby. I was the first. I was about 3 years old. I was so excited because I wanted her to have this baby, but I wanted to have a baby too. So we wore matching maternity outfits. She was 33, I was 3. And when it came time for her to have my baby brother, I was gifted with the opportunity to give birth to a vinyl baby doll. She was off to the hospital. She came back. I understand that when he was about 3 weeks old, I told her that he wasn't really as interesting as I thought, and maybe she could go back and get a livelier one. But she wouldn't do it. All my life feels like I was preparing for motherhood. As a child, I nurtured my dolls. As an adolescent, I dreamed of the time when I would have my own babies. And as a middle-aged, a mature but young woman, I had to deal with the challenge of infertility. And this is a story of where that took me and how I came to be where I am now. Fate dealt me a blow after I married my childhood sweetheart. And even though we were trying, nothing happened. I went through a number of fertility treatments. I had major surgery. I had drug therapy. I had just relax and it'll be fine talks. And I watched what I ate, what I drank. I didn't smoke anything back then. So it still didn't work. Then the opportunity for adoption came. And the whole idea was an easy one for me to embrace. But it wasn't such an easy one to make happen. This is the era of Roe v. Wade, which I supported, but which meant that the availability of infant to toddler children in this country was becoming very limited. We were very open to transracial adoption, but in country, again, that was, we want to place our children with parents who look a little bit like them. At least one of them needs to look like them. So that wasn't going to work. Then I learned about the Holt Adoption Agency. Harry Holt, we're talking now back about 1950, 51, 52, traveled to Korea, and he brought home to his wife 8 children. They already had 4 or 5, so they're a big family. And these were children that didn't have parents. They had been relinquished into adoption, orphanages, or they were just found on the street. So I learned about this agency, and I decided to pursue. Yeah, this had some challenges too. One of them was this was a very Christian-based organization. And although I had been born into Catholicism and I'd explored Protestantism, I'd even taken classes to convert to Judaism, but I had settled on Unitarianism. So how was I, a liberal, left-winging, Democrat, agnostic, Unitarian, going to be able to come across? I told the truth, and they accepted me. So before I go further, I do want to say one thing about adopting children from Korea. Technically, my children had been abandoned, and I know nothing about their background. But you have to understand that this was in the early 1970s. Adoption in Korea was not generally embraced as a way of building a family, because the only purpose in adoption was to provide a male heir. It's a very patrilineal society. So children who were not or could not be cared for were relinquished into safe settings. One of my children was found in a police box, which is kind of like a mailbox. Another was found on the doorstep of an orphanage just before they opened. So these children were not garbage cans or anything like that, but they were not desired in their home country. So here comes Jennifer, 5 months old, big, hopping 10 pounds, and we knew nothing about her but except that she was ours, and that was enough. It was a good time. We wanted to expand our family after a couple more years. And adoption's very expensive, even back then. Not as expensive as it is now, but minimum wage was $1.40 back then. So I went back to the doctor for more fertility treatments, and they poked and prodded and syringed and all that. And then one day when I was in the doctor's office, I just sat up on the table. I looked at him and I said, I'm done. My next child has already been born. She's waiting for me. Don't know exactly who she is, but I'm done with this. Amazingly, 9 months later, she arrived. That was Leah. Leah was a little bit older, but still younger than her older sister. So I had these 2 beautiful, beautiful daughters and a very troubled marriage. So there was a divorce when the children were still pretty young, and after a couple years, I remarried a man that I knew through the Interracial Family Association, who also had a blended family. And he was quite a bit older than I was, and pretty soon, I think I was looking for daddy, and pretty soon it became clear that this was not going to work. So that marriage ended after 2 years. And I hope you can imagine what a dud, how I perceive myself as a terrible dud at marriage. What was I teaching my children? What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I maintain a relationship? Then my luck changed, and I happened to meet a man named Ray Valpey at a folk dance way up north where I was living. He thought he was going to a singles group. He was actually going to a folk dance. And our eyes locked, and it was magical. It was 2.5 more years before we married, because we had these 4 children, all of them about the same age. They were all like 7, 9, 11, that kind of thing. And we weren't going to live together until we were ready to take the step of marriage, which we did. And we had our own little Brady Bunch, but only one boy. There were challenges, of course, but they were manageable. The union is still strong. Those kids all grew up. Our older Korean daughter made me a grandmother at 42, my age, not hers. So if you can do the math, I've got a grandson turning 29 this year. And then 20 years later, a younger daughter said, hey, I'll do that too. So she was an older mother, of course, so they're like that. And our daughter, who so we've got two sets. And now our son, at the tender age of 43, just had his first, maybe only, who knows, child. That's the age I was when I became a grandmother. So that 3-year-old in a maternity smock is now what you see here. And with my 8 precious grandchildren, none of whom look a whit like me, I am a very, very blessed woman. Adoption is a fabulous way to build a family. I wouldn't trade anything I have for anything I don't have. But the last message I want to leave you with is that adoption cures childlessness, but it does not cure infertility. And that is something that I carry with me all the time when I see children who look like their parents, when I look at my grandchildren who look like their parents. And I ask you that if you know someone who lives with this aspect of their lives, be gentle. It's not about love. It's not about parenting. It's about letting go of certain expectations. And I thank you so much for your time. Thank you. The top. It comes out of the top. There we go. All right. And here we go. And maybe I should do this, and like this, and like this. But I don't do windows. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for that wonderful story, and as I would imagine, very well told.
Thank you.
Our next storyteller is Tom Fletcher. Tom came to a workshop we did a few weeks ago and listened to what we had to say, and the next thing we knew, he launched into telling his story. Very brave soul, and he's here tonight to tell his story. He's a photographer. He has some examples of his work here tonight, and let's hear what he has to say. Come on up, Tom.
So when I came to the meeting here to tell my story, I wasn't going to do it, but then since my photographs are up here in the corner and we had some very persuasive people, I'm just like, okay, whatever. So it's going to be good. Just keep saying that. So when I was young, my dad liked to give us things to do and things to create, so we wouldn't just be doing things like working for somebody else. We could create our own things. I never took to them very much. My dad was a tool guy, but I could never figure out when he was asking me to fix something, everything was too complicated. Couldn't figure it out. And you can imagine from a tool guy, just blows his mind that I couldn't figure it out. So he never really taught me as much about how to fix things, so I didn't learn as much as my siblings. So I have dyslexia, and obviously I learn differently than other people. And back in the 70s, kids and families just didn't know what that was. Or if they did, they didn't know really what it was. So fast forward to about 30 years old, And my dad got me my first digital camera. So this is the latest technology at 3 megapixels. And it was way more expensive than he wanted to buy, but he just had to do it. He figured I could have some fun and create with it. So the first time I used it extensively, I was on a trip to Mongolia, and I took it with me, but I also took a backup camera, a simple point and shoot camera, because I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to figure out all the bells and whistles. Ain't many bells and whistles on this one, but I thought there were too many. Boy, was I wrong. This was just so wonderful because you can take hundreds of pictures. You can take all sorts of weird, strange pictures, and you can see in the viewfinder. You just delete the ones that are no good, and you can reshoot. And what's so good about that is you figure out, if you can't figure out to turn the knob left or right to get the f-stop and the aperture, and I don't even know what those things mean half the time, how are you going to figure it out? And then you get your pictures back 2 weeks later. There's no learning involved. But this way you get to see what you're doing, and then you can instantly correct, delete that picture. Okay, well, I got to turn this up instead of down. So that's the problem with when, for me at least, with my dyslexia, I just couldn't figure out, even the next day, I couldn't figure out what I did. I had to take the picture and guess and then redo it. So as the years went by, I began to realize the dyslexia, what it did to me, or what it was doing to my pictures. So I remember I was at the Tulip Festival, and I was on the floor, on the ground, and it was a little muddy, and some guy came up to me and like, "What are you doing on the floor there? Rolling around in the mud?" And I'm like, "Well, I've got my camera, and I've got my little mirror so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm making these tulip pictures look like the land of the giants." And he just thought that was weird, but a half hour later, I caught him doing the same thing over there. And so as the years went by, I've been realizing that's something that my dyslexia does for me. I envision things. I envisioned those Land of the Giant pictures before I took it. So, and I see colors and lines and shapes and things that look like weird things. People don't see it. Either they don't want to or they can't. Sometimes I'll tell them and they, "Oh yeah, okay, now I see it." So one time I was in Venice, I was at St. Mark's, and I was up on this balcony. All these people photographing the square. So in this corner, there was a bunch of garbage on the floor, and nobody was over there because you couldn't see the square from there. Beautiful brickwork and some shapes and all this stuff from the buildings, the beautiful buildings. So I went over there. I was the only one. I snapped pictures. I got home and I developed them. I was very happy. I sold a lot of pictures. Everyone else taking pictures of the throngs of people down there, covering up all the stuff. And I've got the beautiful pictures of the brickwork of Venice. Very happy. So, sometimes my photos are a little unorthodox and a little strange. But it works kind of like my brain does, I guess. So, sometimes the pictures turn out crazy, and then I have to delete them and redo them. Oftentimes I have to delete them because I didn't get the settings right. Picture turned out black or white because I just can't figure that out, even today. But you know, that's all right. The next snap I take sometimes is a really good one. And so this is something I really enjoyed over the years, and you know, I guess my dyslexia isn't so bad after all. And thanks, Dad, for the camera.
Thank you, Tom, first-time storyteller, and he did a fabulous job. Thank you very much. Thanks for your courage in getting up here to do that. Our next storyteller is Claire Yurdin. Am I saying that right? Yurdin? Okay. And she grew up in North Seattle and lived all over the place, including, we found out, Austin, Texas, where I also lived. And she says, long circuitous path led me from growing up in North Seattle to college in the Midwest to Boston to New York City to Paris, then back to New York City, then northern New Jersey, Oregon, then back to North Seattle, then Austin, Bellevue, Redmond, and now, lucky for us, Burien. She says, each move had its logic. And logic for us, as she's here tonight, another first-time storyteller. So welcome to Claire.
Well, good evening. I thought I'd take up how I got where I am now as a writer. First of all, I was a very avid reader as a child, always had my nose in a book. And of course, I went on and got a degree in English. A bit later on in that circuitous path, I was a newspaper reporter in northern New Jersey. I covered 2 towns and I wrote these stories assigned to me. I had a regular beat and I did features also. Then that was followed by 20 years in web and marketing, which I spent writing what people wanted me to say, saying it, better than they were able to do it themselves, but that's why they'd got me, right? So I had a long run. And it was fun, and I enjoyed all of it. Then the pandemic arrived. The jobs sort of dwindled away, everything closed up, and I had time to think, well, what do I want to write? I've been writing what other people want me to write all this time. What really do I want to write? And my husband and I spent 4 years writing a novel, which was actually conceived in a marketing sort of way. We surveyed the current novels. We tried to pick a theme that looked marketable. We worked on it for 4 years off and on. And what do you know, we never could sell it. So this doubled my feeling that maybe I should just, think of what I would like to say myself. So the pandemic was actually sort of a blessing in disguise because the job dwindled away, everything closed up, and honestly, there was nothing to do but write. You do a few chores, there's nothing to do, you just have to sit down at the computer and stare at the screen and try to think of something. So I started with a memoir of my 10 years being the marketing department for a charismatic business broker. He had immigrated to this country from Tanzania. He was the best negotiator I've ever seen, and really devoted to living on the edge. We were always sort of teetering on the edge of negative cash flow, but it was definitely very interesting. And this essay won actually second prize in a national writing contest, and also was long listed in an international competition, which was extremely encouraging to me, to say the very least. So then, moving on, I was aghast, of course, at the pandemic and how it was playing out, and I thought I would seek some historical perspective. I read Daniel Defoe's novel, The Journal of the Plague Year, which is a very well-researched account of an outbreak of bubonic plague in London, 1664 to 1665. I was just stunned to see the parallels between the stages of this outbreak and the stages of our own pandemic. So I broke down the plague into stages and then our pandemic into stages, found the correlation, and with a lot of research related what happened in London at each stage and what happened here at each stage. For example, in London for sanitation, they sent a man around nights with a horse and cart calling out, "Bring out your dead." And people would bring out the dead bodies, heap them into the cart. These would all be buried in a mass grave and covered over by daybreak. Whereas here for sanitation, we had refrigerated trucks. We stacked the bodies up in refrigerated trucks until the overwhelmed funeral parlors could get to them, or the families could come and identify them, which sometimes took quite a while. That's just one example. This, with a great effort, I got it reduced to 18,000 words, which unfortunately out in the market is not terribly marketable. An essay is 5,000 words max, and a novel is 30,000 words. So I'm still kind of struggling with this piece. So taking a break from that, if you want to call it that, I moved on to another topic that interests me, which is the Finnish concept of sisu, which means persistence and endurance in a loose translation. Oh, the Finnish have a very long, cold, hard winter, and they were invaded by Russia at one point, all of which gave them a lot of opportunities to develop persistence and endurance. And the Finns actually have adopted the word sisu as their national motto, and they talk about it a lot. Now, I'm not of Finnish background, so I read several Finnish authors on this subject and wrote an essay, and I also put some of these principles into practice myself, which was really interesting. For example, one sisu principle is do just a little bit more than you think you can. So let's say I'll cycle another 3 minutes on the exercise cycle beyond, what I had planned, or I'll write, another half an hour beyond what I really thought I could do today. And it makes you stronger. It really does. So I tried sending that various places and started to think about marketing once again. I spent a month looking over literary magazines, which are connected to colleges and universities, which traditionally in this country have been the first venue for new writers. I spent a month reading them. And sad to say, at least for me, there's a current preoccupation with gay and transgender themes, dysfunctional families, and providing a venue for writers of color. None of this applies to me. I found this very discouraging. However, I did find one I liked. I submitted to it. But they didn't get out their winter issue. And it doesn't look to me like they're getting out their spring issue either. I read an article that said that a lot of universities are cutting funding for their magazines, and I really hope this isn't happening to them, but they're not really showing any signs of life. So this was quite discouraging, and I gave up for a few months. My husband got a concerning medical report. It was the holiday season, lots of family get-togethers and cooking and decorations and presents and things to think about. And one night around 2 a.m, I started to think about Real Simple magazine, and I pitched 3 editors there about the Sisu editor story. And one of them actually got back to me after several follow-ups. I keep a spreadsheet, I keep track. When did I say who, what, so I don't get confused. It gets confusing when you're submitting to a lot of different people. One of them said, I'm going to pass, but try me again. This was my best news in several months. So I decided to come back, try again. We're planning a trip to Paris with focus on music, assuming that the political situation allows anybody, to go anywhere. And Paris is actually a European center of live music. People don't somehow realize that enough. We're planning to visit a lot of clubs, a lot of venues, and it seems to me I ought to be able to say something about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. I think you just demonstrated a bit of that sisu by being a first-time storyteller up here and just doing such a wonderful job, so thank you. Our next storyteller is Patrick Roush. Patrick is another person who came to our workshop, and next thing we knew, he was telling a story. He just jumped right in. And he is from Michigan, but he married a local woman from Yurdin and has 2 children. He builds motorcycles or likes motorcycles, and his story has heart. So please welcome Patrick Roush.
All right. Well, this is me confronting some fears and getting a few things off my chest. So I think that's what this is really all about. All right. In the past, children born with a heart condition used to be called blue babies on account of their hearts would be unable to pump oxygenated blood to the rest of their bodies. Rather than a healthy pink color, their lips and fingernails and faces would have a bluish pallor because the blood was simply not oxygenated. I was born one of these kids, and we know now that I have a condition that runs in my family genetically. My sister recently was searching online and found some records and found the death certificate from 1933 of a woman named Susan Roush, who would have been my aunt. The postmortem diagnosis from 1933 was mitral insufficiency. So mitral is a valve within your heart between the atria. I was born in the summer of 1970, and within the first few days, my mother knew something was wrong. I was listless. I wouldn't nurse, and when I would, I'd vomit everything up pretty quickly, and I didn't gain any weight, and I had that bluish pallor. By the holiday season, my parents had given up on all of the local doctor and changed family doctors several times, and nobody could quite put their finger on what was wrong with me, and told my mom that she was nursing poorly and all sorts of good things like that. Blame it on the mom. So my parents got wise to all of this and decided to take me to the University of Michigan from my home at Battle Creek to the Mott Children's Hospital. So shortly afterwards, I was diagnosed by Dr. Stern, the chief clinician at U of M since 1933. A pillar in the field of pediatric cardiology. His diagnostic tools that he used on me were mainly his ears, pressed against my chest and my back and my side, along with the usual things of like an x-ray, stethoscopes, blood pressure, and this new machine called an EKG. These are, of course, long before the days of CT, CAT, MRI, and even ultrasound. I remember all those things coming out. Sometimes in a wooden box was the first time I saw a sonogram. It was literally built into a card box from the shop down in the basement. Well, Dr. Stern's diagnosis has actually maintained true 100%, and he was spot on. Mitral insufficiency, aortic coarctation, atrial septal defects, which are holes between your atrium, and other lesser problems. The diagnosis, like I mentioned, still holds 100% true. I had the good luck and good timing to be born when and where I was. At the University of Michigan, just as I got there, there was a study that was about to begin. Dr. Sloan from the University of Texas, who was experimenting in early pediatric surgeries to correct atrial septal defects, was just beginning a sabbatical where he would be doing those surgeries and that research. I was put on the docket for surgery. The holes between the left and right atria allow your blood to mix. So oxygenated blood never really fully gets out of your heart. Again, blue baby. I was in the hospital for the first half of my first year. My mother stayed with me the whole time, and my dad, who was a food scientist at Post in Battle Creek, would come on the weekends and give her a little R&R. I have the gift of parents who had relatively advanced education in the sciences, and after the surgeries for all the kids in my ward, we were in a part of a controlled group for an experiment. All the kids had metabolic problems, kind of like a shock coming out of the surgeries. And as you know, with Gatorade and other drinks like that, it's meant to replenish your electrolytes. Well, luckily my dad was a food scientist, and the doctors would call him every so often with a need. And he would go into the lab and pull out all the ingredients to make one of their flagship products at the time, Tang. And he would spike it with potassium or sodium or calcium or whatever a specific patient would need, and take it in a 20-pound carton or tub to the University of Michigan the next weekend. And he actually kept a number of the kids alive by doing that because they couldn't get it in any other way. The vital electrolytes maintain the heart rhythm. They have to be in balance. Over the years, the cohort from my ward would frequently meet for clinical follow-ups. They'd run us all through all the same processes at all the same times. And so we'd all get to know each other. We'd all be friends, and the parents were a support group for one another. And it was common that when we were there for overnights, the children would share their stuffed animals together when they'd go in for a procedure. Slowly but surely, I started to collect stuffed animals, not because they were my hobby, but because the kids didn't come back from procedures. That was my childhood. Slowly but surely, yeah, they didn't return. In 1978, many of the kids who had my mitral valve prolapse problem were offered a new experimental surgery study that was happening that summer, which was porcine allograft valves, which in modern parlance is pig valves. That was one of the first rounds of the research for putting them into children. And my folks talked with Dr. Stern and hemmed and hawed about it. We had a couple of months to decide, and they pulled me off the list. At the time, I was 7 years old. I was in Cub Scouts. I was playing t-ball. I was tromping around out in the woods and playing in the backyard all day, in the fields, Michigan, and I dodged a bullet. Within a few years, every child who got a pig valve had died either from rejection or calcification. I continued to thrive. I was never a good athlete running track or cross-country skiing or playing soccer later in high school, but as long as people never saw my scrawny, scarred chest, they never knew anything was wrong with me or that I had something else going on that made me approach my life a little differently. When you live with the sword of Damocles over your head, you want a normal life without the attention of that sword reminding you at all times. So, sorry about my notes here. I just need to keep myself in check. But yes, I live. I'll spare you all of the tales of woe and or daring do and lore of my life, but I can say that I've done a lot, as if I had no time to lose. In my very close acquaintance with the lingering death, I've received a certain gift, and that is getting out and living. In 1991, at 20 years old, I had my last clinic at the University of Michigan shortly before I moved out here. I had a stress test, and they hooked me up with all sorts of machines, a breathing oximeter, and all the bells and whistles. And I had recently been playing soccer. So by the time I got off the machine, when somebody finally waved at me, I had blown the test away. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. And when I got off the machine, I turned around, and every doctor, resident, intern, student, nurse who could possibly be pulled in from pediatric cardiology was in that laboratory, and they gave me a standing ovation. In 2012, I received my first pacemaker on account of all the scar tissue that's inside of my heart blocking the electrical paths. In 2019, I received a valve, a new pacemaker with Wi-Fi. They fixed 6 holes, patched the kink in my aorta, and that nearly killed me, but I made it through. All of this has to be acknowledged that it was my parents who were there every day, hedged bets when they thought that better technology would lay ahead. And I'm still living for all of those other kids who couldn't. I still have all of the stuffed animals. I'm here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Patrick, for that incredible story. I mean, just, whew.
I wish I could have added more details.
Might be good not to.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, the next storyteller couldn't be here tonight, and so the next storyteller is me. And there are actually 2 themes for tonight, because the theme for January was how did I get here? But the January session was canceled. And so to honor all those people who'd come up with a story, we're doing that one. And February theme is my first crush. And that's what I'm going to talk about. When I was 11, I was still a child playing with Barbie. My most prized possession, I had this shiny black carry case that held Barbie and her clothes and her accessories. And I'd take it over to my friend's house. We'd spread all the stuff out on her bed. And we, like for the next hour or more, we'd put the clothes on, we'd take them off, we'd put the clothes on, take them off, we'd make outfits. Because Barbie's wardrobe was a lot better than ours. Because Barbie was a grown-up with a grown-up body. So she had an evening gown. She had a cocktail dress. She had party dresses. She had big hats and high heels. She had a white fur stole. And for us, our play was really a rehearsal for when we were grown up and we could wear stuff like that. Well, it seems like from one day to the next, really almost overnight, I went from being that child to being a lovesick preteen. So what happened? The Beatles happened. And I was in love with Paul. I remember the first time I heard I Want to Hold Your Hand. It was like a bolt of lightning. This jolt of electricity went through me and made me want to start screaming. And then there was She Loves You. And that was just another one like that. And it wasn't just me. All the girls were going through this, all the girls I knew. One day we went on a field trip to a museum. And I was wearing my button. I had one with a picture of the Beatles, and I had another one that said, I love Paul. And I saw these other girls there, girls I didn't know from other schools with their buttons, and we'd look at each other like, yeah, I understand. We love the Beatles, and they make us want to scream. But there were quiet moments too, with their ballads. And I clearly remember a day at Girl Scouts. So here we are in our green uniforms with that sash, sitting on the floor or on the couch at our leader's house, working on our blanket stitch toward the stitchery badge and singing in harmony, If I Fell. And then came Ed Sullivan. And it was so more exciting to see them on TV than in magazines, because It was live. You could have close-ups. And when there was a close-up of Paul, I knew he was looking at me. And just, you could see them singing and playing their instruments and going like this and going, woo! And it just was, I wanted to scream. And I felt it coming up and up, but my parents were there. So I screamed on the inside. But then something wonderful and totally unexpected happened. My older sister, who was 25, took me to the concert at Shea Stadium. She was the other kind of long hair, the kind that liked classical music and opera. And of course, she'd heard of the Beatles, but she wasn't really into them. I mean, I don't know that she was even that familiar with their music. But she took her 13-year-old sister to Shea Stadium and sat there in this sea of shrieking, hysterical girls. And they were there, they were right out there in front of us. And I just felt it coming up and coming up. And I let it rip and I went, Paul, Paul. And I was just screaming, Paul, Paul, I love you, Paul. And then every once in a while, a girl would make a break for it, and she'd run. She'd be running toward the stage, running across the grass. And we'd be going, run, run, you can do it. Now, there were 2 lines of policemen, you know, in a V formation, coming, fanning out from the stage, just standing there, biding their time. And when the girl would get close, 2 of them would grab her and haul her off. And then the next one would be off and we'd go, run, run. I don't think I'd ever screamed so much in my life. You know, I was probably hoarse by the end of the day, but it was the most exciting day in my life up to that point. Well, through junior high and high school, my passion for Paul just faded. But my love and respect for the Beatles just grew and grew, because they grew, they evolved, they changed. I mean, basically they'd gone from She Loves You, yeah, 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 to Sgt. Pepper in about 2 years. And they taught me things. I mean, they exploded the world and introduced me to, well, to start with, to British culture, which I knew nothing about, except that they had a queen who went like this. But I didn't know. I hadn't known any British people. So, of course, I knew about the twiggy eyelashes and the mini skirts and everything. But I also learned about British society. And they introduced me to British English. Now, I remember with my friends puzzling over this line. Every summer, we can rent a cottage in the Isle of Wight if it's not too dear. And we go, what? What does that mean? I mean, what, dear? Like beloved? And it just never occurred to us that it might mean something different in England because, I mean, we all spoke English, right? I think it was years before I found out that it meant expensive. And then musically, they just brought so much that was new and innovative and creative. They brought the sitar into music, okay? They had a harpsichord. They had these lush, full orchestrations in some songs. They brought in British music hall stuff. Everything was new, everything was creative, everything was just dynamite. Let's see. Sorry. And it just kept us going, that this was the most dynamic thing that had ever happened to us. Well, my passion for Paul wasn't there anymore, but I just kept up with all the Beatles stuff right through when I got to college, and then not so much. Sorry, I'm just not there tonight. So as I was thinking of this the other day, going over the story, it hit me that Paul was just another version of Barbie. He was the man that I could fall in love with and experience those powerful feelings as a rehearsal for when I was grown up and I could fall in love and have a relationship with somebody I actually knew. It's been a long time since I had feelings for Paul. But on the rare occasion that I hear, "I want to hold your hand," or "She loves you" on the radio, it takes me right back to that first time. And I feel it coming up, and I'm screaming on the inside. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot I'm doing this too. Okay, our final storyteller is Steve Finney. Now I'm just going to tell you from my own experience that Steve is married to Judy, who is my first friend up here and is still a dear friend. So I've known him for many years, but it really wasn't until a few years ago I was having dinner at their house. All of a sudden he starts telling this story. And it was fascinating. We were riveted listening to him tell a story. So I recruited him for tonight, and it had nothing to do with gluten-free cookies. So here he is, Steve Finney. Here he is.
Okay. Thanks, Deborah. So I was told to tell my story, how I got here. So let's get comfortable. I was born in Geraldine Court, Sacramento, 1959, September 10th. And then when I was 16, my neighbor, Canute, gave me a job in Alaska. And then, after a terrible fishing season, there I was in Sequim. 3 horses, 2 children, a wife, and no money. And the pressure of being a father with everybody depending on you and no money, living in Sequim, was on my back. What am I going to do now? Well, what are my options? I could work at the lavender farm. That might make some money, or not. Maybe I could hold a DOT sign if I could only get in the union. I could drive around, and what's behind that big gate over the knoll? That's a big fancy gate. What is that? Oh, it's the Patel Marine Science Lab. There's money there. I don't know where it is, and I don't know what it is, but there's money in that laboratory. So I made a friend that happened to work at the Patel Marine Science Lab in Sequim. Give me a tour. Just give me a tour. What's going on in here? And he walks me through all these experiments and the thises and the that. So we get to this place with test tubes. And there's a little test tube and across, and I go, what's this thing called? What's going on here? He goes, this is a testing facility. This is a bioassay test. This is where we test the toxicity of sediment before dredging projects get done to make sure there's not arsenic and things in the water. Cool, how does that work? Well, we take these and amphipods, they're called Ripoxinius ambronius amphipods, and we put them in the test tube. And the different levels of sand in each test tube where they start to die off indicates how toxic the sediment is. It's kind of cool. What are these things? Wink, wink. They're sand fleas. Oh. Well, how do you get the sand fleas? Oh, it's a pain in the ass. The scientists have to get in the boat. They go out, and the boat breaks down, and blah, 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 blah. I go, why don't you just buy them? Nobody sells them. If they did, would you buy them? Oh, yeah. Okay. The next day, I launched aquatic testing and supply company supplying marine invertebrates to aquatic testing supply labs. I said, can I borrow that little box over there, the dredge? A little stainless steel box about this big. Take it over to the fab shop, have them duplicate it, bring it back. And I'm selling sand fleas for $1 a piece. I take my little crappy boat out off Whidbey Island and I throw it in 5 feet of water because at high tide all the sand fleas are in the water, and I dredge it across, shake out the sand, and use an actual little tea strainer to braille the sand fleas out of the basket into the 5-gallon bucket. Mix it up, take a sample, put a lid on it, and take it to Vancouver and get a check for $2,000. Wow. I'm making money here. But if they're going to give me $1 for a sand flea, what about this big hairy worm that came up? Maybe $10? I don't even know what it is. So I've got this fish toad over there in Squim. It's about half the size of this podium. You know those white fish toads you see ice and salmon in? It's got a little pump in there, and I got my stuff, and I got my dissecting microscope and my book, and I get a phone call. It's the friend of a friend of a friend that says, hey, I understand you have live tanks up in Seattle. Well, technically, yeah. Would spiny lobster live in that? Sure, it's Puget Sound, everything would live in that. Okay, that's what I want to do. I'm going to ship you some lobster, live, put them in the tank, let them rejuvenate, put them back in the box and send them over to Asia. All right. It's a favor or something, right? He goes, I'll pay for all the expenses. I'll give you 50 cents a pound for your effort. Okay. Great. Now, keep in mind, this is Wednesday. He goes, Monday morning, I'll have 10,000 pounds landing in Seattle. Like, first thing through my head, 10,000 pounds, 50 cents a pound, that's $5,000. How often do you want to do this? Twice a week. That's $10,000 a week. Are you kidding? Yeah, send him up. I'll be fine. Okay, real good. Thanks, bye. Click. What does that mean? 10,000 pounds. I've got a 4-foot fish box out in Squim. I've got 10,000 pounds getting loaded in Baja, headed for Seattle. What does it look like? I don't know. Do you know? Somebody said 10,000 pounds. Would you know what 10,000? I have no idea. Does it fill this podium? Does it fill the room? Does it fill the building? So I buy some, cube it out, do the math, slap my forehead and realize, oh no, I need a facility. I need a facility on the water in Seattle tonight. Okay, so I drive by, I grab my crew member off the fishing boat. You're vice president, let's go. We got a project to do. You get in the trucks. You go north, I go south. And if you've ever been to Salty's in West Seattle, if you're looking across the city to the right is a big old empty, it used to be Pier 1. Old deserted warehouse. Been there since the beginning, Pier 1. Call up Merlino, who owns it. At least 3,000 square feet. Drive down First Avenue. The Latinos are down there looking for work back then. Habla inglés. Habla inglés. Sí, speak English. I speak English. Great, you're the foreman. Okay? 7 people in the pickup, let's go. Right? Stop at the U-Haul place, pick up the paint sprayer, pick up the power washer, clean out the pigeons, paint it white, go. Hey, friend of mine, there's power at that pole over there. Bring in a bunch of power and build a box here with a whole bunch of switches and plugs and stuff. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. Just go. It's now Thursday. It's now Friday. I need a tank. I need tanks. Now keep in mind, this is an empty, deserted warehouse with lights hanging down. There's holes in the floor. It's been deserted for decades. I could get water tanks, cut them in half, flip them open. I could concrete and do the concrete runs. I got it. John, get in the truck. Let's go. Where are we going? Just shut up. Let's go. Pull up the Toys R Us. Steve, for God's sakes, this is not the time to be buying presents for your kids. Panicking here. Those tin swimming pools, 12-foot diameter swimming pools with a little vinyl liner. I'd like 6 of those, please. And the lady's like, you want 6 swimming pools in November? Yes, please, don't ask questions. Come down, line the tanks, and just want to do a quick check here. Oh, I never started it. Okay, well, try. Built a bunch of tables, and Monday morning, we're up running PVC lights, big lights inside, air blowers, big air blowers running PVC down into the tanks with these PVC grids blowing bubbles. And we circulated the water. We're ready. And here they come. And we open the first box. Hey, dude, your lobsters are all dead. They missed the flight, the jet. They had to fly the prop plane all the way up from Baja to Seattle. He goes, no problem, just cook them. Cook them. Cook them. That's a whole different party, okay? This run the water through thing is there's no health department or anything. Cooking them is a whole 3-sink thing, right? Oh. Well, luckily I had a friend up in Anacortes. We took all the 10,000 pounds up to Anacortes and we blast froze them and came back. We did this. Next shipment, now we're making money. This is looking pretty good. And he disappears. Never to be seen again. Oh. I've got this facility. I've got my crew working. I've got money out all over the place. And for a while, we were actually the core supplier of live seafood all around Seattle. Seattle's live seafood warehouse. Fax your orders in, come pick up your lobster and head out every morning. So we go up to Canada. The next big fishery up there is the Dungeness crab fishery up in Prince Rupert, Alaska. Fishermen's meeting at the schoolhouse. All the fishermen come. How do you guys sell your live stuff? Oh, it's a pain in the ass, man. The markets run their trucks up and they can't take all of our load and blah, blah, blah. I'll be right back. Hey, Chinatown, Vancouver. How do you guys get your live seafood? Oh, it's a pain in the ass. We got to run our trucks up, right? The fishermen aren't there. Would you sell or would you buy for a little more if you didn't have to run your trucks? Yes. Fishermen, would you sell for a little less if you didn't have to wait for the trucks? Yes. Alaska Airlines, can I please lease a 737? The Canadian Fish Plant, I will take it. Thank you. And of course, the fish never came. And I'm throwing the money out. And I've got the crew. And I've got the plane tickets. Make the call. Keep spending or cut it. Keep spending or cut it. How far are you going to go? Mortgage the house now or cut it? Cut it. Call up 6 months later. Biggest season ever. Biggest season ever. So I went into the insurance business with my father, learned how to sell, and I'm 62 years old. And I've been selling for the last 20 years in the technology industry. That's how I got here.
What'd I tell you? He's a great storyteller. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Thanks to all of our storytellers tonight, particularly all of you who are here for the first time. And I applaud your bravery. I applaud your ability to communicate and live in front of a bunch of people. And I hope you will come back and tell more stories. And I also hope all of you will tell your friends and your acquaintances and see if we can keep this 7 stories actually at 7 stories. So thank you very much.